Good afternoon, folks. Hope everybody's well. Thank you once again for joining us this afternoon for this installment of the STEM Summer Series brought to you by UC San Diego Create and our partners at Young Women in Bio in Southern California and also DoD STEM. Today's conversation will be with Women in STEM, and we have a panel of some amazing women to tell you all about their journeys in science and engineering, and also about some tips to survive such a rigorous area to work in, such a demanding part of your life. And so before we get started today, I did want to take a moment to again acknowledge some of our partners with DoD STEM, and we have with us today Emily Quinn. If I said that correctly this time, Emily, I apologize if I did not. But to tell you a little bit more and give you some information on DoD STEM. Emily?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I won't take up too much time. All I want to do is make you all aware. Many folks don't recognize how much the DoD invests in STEM education and opportunities for young scientists like yourselves across all age groups. So I encourage you to visit our website. That's dodstem.us. I'm going to drop that in the chat. But there you'll find a continuum of opportunities that range from the pre-K level all the way up to postdoctoral. One that I think is particularly interesting for this group is the SMART Scholarship, which you can apply to receive funding to go to bachelor's, master's, or PhD programs in the STEM fields. And then there's a work commitment with the DoD. So it's getting money from the department with a guaranteed job at the end. There's a lot of great opportunities I encourage you to explore, and we're really grateful to have partners at Create and other organizations across the US who let us touch base with the amazing scientists like yourselves. So I appreciate being here, and I'm excited to learn from the panelists as well. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Emily, for those words and those resources that you bring forth. I did want to take a moment and encourage you all that are out there in attendance, if you would, because we're trying to kind of traverse this whole virtual platform that we're on. If you could chat in the chat, maybe punch in what level of college or school that you're in, and or what organization you might represent or are affiliated with, so that our panelists are able to kind of gauge who's in the audience and maybe set up their responses in a way that's going to be impactful for you all, take into consideration what level, where you are in your academic journey. I did also want to take a moment to inform you all that, again, this is one of 7 different sessions that has been put together, a multitude of different topics that we cover. And so we want to encourage you all to check out not only this one, but the ones that are left in this month, and also the ones that have happened already that are recorded and available for you. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce my co-moderator for today. And this is Christina Herbert from Young Women in Bio. Christina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name, like you said, is Christina Herbert. Thanks so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to co-host all these wonderful young women today. Young Women in Bio, so I'm the chair of Young Women in Bio Southern California chapter, and our mission is to give girls today the inspiration and support they need to become tomorrow's leaders in science, technology, engineering, and math, so STEM in general. We normally bring all sorts of hands-on science activities to young women in the San Diego and Southern California areas, but of course, due to COVID-19 now, we can't do that. So we've moved a lot of our programming virtually, as have all of the other chapters across the US. We have 13 chapters across the US and Canada. So I encourage you to check out our website to see some of the programming that we've had, because now we're posting all of our programs to our YouTube channel. And so you can, and since everything's posted on Zoom, you can really register for any of the events all around the country now. So, but it's a pleasure to be here co-hosting. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, thank you. And I'm seeing that there are some folks putting in the chat where they're from. We see have a pretty diverse group. I want to encourage you all, if you haven't done so already, to please do so. And I think with that we can get right to it. Christina, would you like to move us forward, please?
Sure.
You muted?
Unmute. Thank you. So I want to welcome Taneka Lewis. She is one of our panelists today. She is a computer and electronics engineer at the Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific in San Diego, California here. And she earned her bachelor's in physics and became one of the first African-American women to earn such a degree from Wheeling Jesuit University. So she has a master's of computer science in computer engineering and focuses on microelectronics and VLSI design. So I'll have to find out what that is. And she hopes to inspire Black and brown girls to pursue careers in STEM. Thank you, Taneka, for joining us. And our next panelist is Beata Mierzwa. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So she's a molecular biologist who combines science, art, and fashion to share the beauty of biology with the world. So her research at UCSD and the Ludwig Institute of Cancer Research explores how different types of cells divide to broaden the world's understanding of cell division and improve cancer therapy. But on the side, then she creates science-themed drawings and clothes, making artwork for journal covers, conferences, and even space mission patches. So you can see in the picture there, she's wearing some of her microscopy images. So she also serves as a AAAS, that's the American Association of Sciences, if-then ambassador, and Beata is a strong advocate for women in STEM. So she brings all sorts of unique activities to young girls to inspire them to pursue STEM. And then we have Eliana Colunga. She has her BS degree in computer science and a master's of science in artificial intelligence from the Tec de Monterrey. And she has a PhD in computer science and cognitive science. And she's currently the director of the language project at the Colorado University Boulder, where she and her team work on building communication models of how young children learn language. That sounds pretty awesome. And the next one, so then we have Dequina Nicholas, and she is a postdoctoral fellow at UCSD. So her work focuses on how the immune system and cellular metabolism impact metabolic disease. And she has a PhD in biochemistry from Loma Linda University. So in her current position, she's investigating the impact of inflammation and metabolism on reproduction. So Dr. Nicholas will be starting her own lab up at UC Irvine in July of next year as an assistant professor, and she really enjoys mentoring. So she's a great person to have with us here today. Thank you so much. I think that was the last panelist, right? Oh no, we have Teresa Ramirez, sorry. Okay, and Teresa Ramirez is a program manager and of member communities at the American Physiological Society organization. So she has her Bachelor of Science in General Biology from Cal State University, and then she participated in the National Cancer Institute postbac program, and she obtained a doctorate degree in molecular pharmacology and physiology from Brown, where she established a SACNAS chapter. And she's pursued a postdoctoral fellowship at the NIAA, which is the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism at the NIH, where she studied the effects of chronic alcohol exposure in the liver. Terrific. And I think, pretty sure she's the last one.
So yeah, thank you for those introductions. We have such an amazing group. Yeah, I'll tell you, we've done a couple of these panels, and I think this is the one that I've been the most nervous about. So I don't know what that says, right? But as you see, we have, you know, a breadth of experience, a breadth of knowledge, you know, in wisdom, really, that we hope that we're going to be able to tap into this afternoon. So folks out there in the audience, I want to also encourage you to start writing down some questions. You know, you heard where some of the experience is. We heard a little bit about journeys. And so now I'm going to want to move the direction here if you all are okay with it. And I'm going to ask you all to, you know, we've heard what's on paper, we heard the credentials, right? But I want to hear a little bit more about your individual experiences, right? And I'm going to ask each of our panelists if they can share maybe 3 to 5 minutes about what wasn't on your bio, right? So this is who we know you as, but what was it behind the scenes that kind of helped you to get to that bio that we just introduced you as? And I think we can start, why don't we start with, let's see, Dequina. Would you mind kicking that off for us?
Do not mind at all.
All right.
Okay, no, I'll give you the short version. My parents immigrated to the United States from Jamaica and Dominica, so 2 islands in the Caribbean. And with their background, they didn't understand the American education system and higher education. So that kind of left me at a place where I kind of had to figure out stuff on my own almost every step of the way. So most of the time I had no clue what I was doing. I just knew school was important. I wanted to go to school and I liked science. So that's what I figured out in high school. By the time I graduated undergrad, kind of through some random connections and talking to some people on the phone, I was like, you know, I think I really want to do research. And I found it exciting, but I didn't really know what research was. I applied to graduate schools, and then somehow, by the grace of God, I got into Loma Linda University. And at that point, I started graduate school, and I still had no idea what I was doing. I was way in over my head. It was crazy. I was drowning. And then one of the professors kind of noticed this and said, "Hi, there's a I'm a STEAM program, which is an initiative for maximizing diversity or development and students program that's supported by the NIH." And I joined that program. And that was really the beginning of me finding support in order to make it through my academic journey. Within that program, I received some structured training in like how to present, how to network, how to interact with people, which, like I said, I was still at a little bit of a loss for. But what I did know was that I really liked science a lot. I had these burning research questions about diabetes and metabolic disease because of the diabetes in my family. My mother has diabetes, my aunt, my grandma. I'm pre-diabetic. So it's really, really pervasive. And I'm just really interested in, you know, understanding like how this disease progresses and how can we better combat it, especially since it's so prevalent in minority communities. So one thing I noticed going through graduate school is that I had this burning desire and questions I wanted to answer in science, right? And I decided the best way to do that was going on academic trajectory where I could start my own lab and ask my own questions. I wanted complete, total scientific freedom. However, I still wasn't 100% sure how to get there. And then also personally, as a woman, I wanted to be able to have a family and have a home life and have balance. And where I was in school, I did not see that around me. I didn't see women professors who like had kids and a life and were doing great science. And it just kind of got me down throughout my graduate program and thinking that, hey, this probably isn't possible. Like I have to choose one or the other. And I think it happens in a lot of different graduate programs that they make that seem like that's the case, but it's not the case. And so in my 5th year in grad school, yeah, it took me a while. My 5th year in grad school, a professor came to give a talk. And one of my research professors said, "Hey, do you want to go pick her up from the airport?" I said, "Okay, yeah, cool." So I got in the car, picked her up, and immediately I was just so impressed with how like excited and full of life she was. And the first thing she talks about in the car on the way to going to give a science presentation was, "Oh, I'm going on a trip with my kids to Grand Canyon next weekend." I was like, "What? She has kids? She's going on vacations?" I've read her papers. These are like papers in top journals, and like she's phenomenal. I was like, you know what? I have to work for her. I have to see how she does this. So I ended up doing my postdoc with Dr. Barbara Nikolajczyk in Boston, at Boston University. And I got some insight into like her life and her approach and her personal one-on-one mentorship and the time that she took to not just be my mentor, but be my friend. She's still my friend to this day, looks at my grants. I'm about to have my first kid in a couple of months. She's been talking to me and like going over how in the world do you like manage being pregnant and getting things done and feeling tired. And it's just amazing the difference that it made in my life to have, I guess, a visual of what I wanted for myself in somebody else. And that's kind of driven me to try to be that for other women and other people. So after I left her lab, I came here to UC San Diego. I had some really good mentors here. I met Beata, who's putting this together through my friend Olivia and the Arachnid program, which had some more structured training, which was really, really helpful. Because once again, I said, I wanted to be a professor. I don't even know what to do. How do I become competitive as an applicant? I have no idea. So having a structured program to help teach me these things, like how to apply and how to present and how to network and how to use that network, was really, really important moving forward. And it just made it really important for me to pass that information on to other students who don't have parents or friends or people who are in the higher education system who know what they're doing. And so I guess it's kind of like a little snapshot into me and why I guess I have a passion for other first generation students, because we just don't have that same hand to help just pull us up, you know, because people don't know what we're doing. To this day, my mom still doesn't know what I do for a living, but that's okay.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing. You just captured so much in that short amount of time, Dequina, and thank you. We'll come back to a lot of the different topics that you touched on, because I'm sure we're going to continue to hear similar themes arise from our other speakers. Taneka, would you care to go next, please?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So I always knew that I liked math and science because I like taking things apart, but I really didn't know what type of engineering or how to get into it. I played basketball, so I knew the way for me to study anything was to let's get this scholarship, let's go to school, let's figure it out. So I got there and I kind of switched my major, or like I guess the trajectory of my major with what my initial plan was, and then I turned out that I didn't like it. So I started out as computer science and I was like, this is boring. I don't like it. This is not what I want to do. So I just was like, yeah, we're gonna figure something else out. But again, still playing basketball, that was my focus. And then I was in a place where there weren't a lot of people that looked like me, especially within the STEM field. So I changed my major to physics, and there were literally 5 people in my classes. So it was like, it worked out just because of practices and sports, and I was able to kind of balance the two. But then I realized I still wanted a degree in engineering. So I went on to get my master's in engineering with literally like minimal sleep, and we figured it out, and I had to teach myself a lot of stuff because the bridge between physics and engineering isn't really along the same lines. So I really had to figure a lot of stuff out on the way. But luckily, like with the ability or like abilities you learn from basketball with problem solving and just like to keep going and put your foot down, I just kept going. But I realized that along the way, I didn't really have a lot of mentors, again, or people that look like me. So my motivation for doing it was, yes, it's something I want to do, but I also want to be that mentor for someone else, be that representation for other people, so they can look back and be like, oh, it is doable, or where did she go wrong, or how can I teach somebody else how to, go left instead of right, and other resources that they can leverage and use in order to help them get where they want to go.
Wow, awesome. So you mean to tell me, Taneka, that you can like basketball and still be a scientist or an engineer?
Yeah, you can get buckets and you can show out on the chalkboard.
Man, all right. Well, we're gonna come back to that, because I think that's another very interesting point that we need to touch on, right? Where does identity and culture kind of fit into being a scientist, being an engineer? The next person, I would love to have you introduce yourself. Teresa, would you mind telling us a little bit about your journey?
Yes, thank you, Beto. Well, I am Teresa Ramirez. I am straight out of Compton, California, that made it to an Ivy League school. I'm a first generation Mexican American. My parents immigrated from Zacatecas, Mexico to California, and I was born in Torrance, California, but I'm very proud of my culture. As you can see, I love color. I love color, but one thing that I definitely want to say is that thanks to my parents' support, and they always instilled in me the importance of higher education, the importance of helping within the community. And I continue with that because education is key to success. No one can take that degree away from you. Even when I was told many times that I wasn't smart, that I didn't have the skill sets that were needed to be in a PhD program, that I could just get a master's degree to make a difference in my Latino community. And guess what? I finished on. Yes, it was hurtful to hear these words, but I continue to instill those seeds of empowerment to many students from especially underserved communities, like the community I grew up in, Compton, which had limited resources. I didn't think I was going to become a scientist. I thought I was going to become a pediatrician, a medical doctor. But throughout this route of education, I met mentors. I met people who saw my potential, and they encouraged me to participate in summer research programs, which was an eye-opener. That's how I got to Brown University, through a summer research program through the Leadership Alliance program. I also got involved in the Minority Biomedical Research Support Program, which, thanks to my mentor, Dr. Laura Robles, she introduced me to research, but also introduced me to an amazing organization that I've been a member for 20 years, SACMAS, Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. And it's not just about receiving, but it's also being able to give back. So I continue mentoring students through this organization. Through science, I've learned that you get to learn, you get to travel and present your research, you get to meet amazing people from different cultures who speak different languages. I've gotten the opportunity to travel to Japan to present my postdoctoral research. Never thought that I would visit Japan. Another thing that I've learned is that you have a life that you have to enjoy. So you have two choices. Either you're stuck in the research lab and trying to get results, or you could work in the research lab, but also do fun stuff. Like when I was a grad student, I learned how to dance Argentine tango. So that was sort of my balance. When I would feel stressed out, I would go for a dance and I would come back with a smile, and people would be like, "Why are you so happy?" Well, I had some time for me. And then I joined a Brown's Mariachi, which we used to go for gigs and sing in the community in Rhode Island, in Providence, Rhode Island. So that was sort of my balance. But one thing I do definitely advise is that never leave your life aside. One of the things that I do regret is not starting a family, because I was so focused in my career that now it's like, okay, when is this going to happen? But I definitely enjoyed every route and every point of my journey in grad school, because there's ups and downs, kind of like a roller coaster, but you make the best of it. And lastly, one of the things that my parents instilled in me is the ability to give back to the community. So now, with all the experience of doing research, being a grad student, being a postdoc at NIH, a place that I dreamt of going, and I did my postbac program, then I did my postdoc. And so how can I give back to the community? And through different experiences and different people, mentors again, who believed in me and who have shared resources, I am the program manager at the American Physiological Society, where I'm using science in a different way, where I continue helping communities in different ways, providing fellowships, internship opportunities, not only for students, postdocs, faculty. So to me, it really fulfills me, but I'm still dreaming of what my next step is. One of the dreams is to go back to California and be the president of California State University, Dominguez Hills, my alma mater, and eventually the chancellor of all the Cal State systems. That is my dream, and still trying to figure out how. But if life has something different for me, I'm open for it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Compton. That's her handle, by the way, Dr. Compton.
Doctora Compton, PhD.
Doctora Compton. There you go. So thank you, for really kind of starting to peel off a few extra layers, right? I saw a little bit of vulnerability that you were tapping into, and I appreciate how you all are bringing it, right? And kind of talking about all these things that are real, right? We want to have a real, genuine, and raw conversation with you all. So I'm going to invite the next speaker up, Eliana Colunga. If you can share your journey with us, please.
Yes, sure. So I guess when I talk about women in science, I would say that I have been blessed with a large amount of obliviousness, and that is really helpful sometimes. So I grew up as a kid in the 80s when personal computers were starting, and there was this whole thing about kids programming. It's back, but there was a period where it didn't happen, but in the 80s. And so I started coding when I was a kid, and then so I went to college in computer science, and I never noticed that I was the only girl. It just didn't didn't notice. And then so when I was in college, I could already program in like 5 or 6 languages. So like no boy was gonna tell me like I didn't know what I was doing, because I did. So it was just kind of, I like, I hear a lot of stories about all these obstacles and people saying things, and like people would tell me like, how, like the professor said that, how don't put up with it. And I was like, what do you think that meant? Like, just like really dumb. I've come around. I'm savvier now at nearly 50, but it took me a while, and so it was a very it had a protective effect. And so when I was in college, I took a class on artificial intelligence, and I got really into it. And then I started working in a lab, and then I did my master's in that, and then in artificial intelligence. But I was always really curious about how people did it. So my professors were forever frustrated with me asking, yeah, that's cool, machines, but how about people? Like, how do people do it? And so when I apply to grad school, I wanted to go to a program that did cognitive science. I was one time just venting to someone on the internet about how a professor gave me a bad grade because I wrote this whole paper about how people do image processing. That's not how computers do it. And he was like, it seems like what you want to do is cognitive science. And I was like, what is that? And so I started, I only applied to programs that had a cognitive science component. And so that's how I got to the US to do grad school. That was a long time ago. As part of my obliviousness, I didn't get the memo. I had a baby in grad school. I also had a baby on my first semester in my new tenure track job. I got a bunch of comments like, "What did your department think about it?" What do you mean? It's like my baby. It's in my uterus. What do they have to say about it? So and so it can be done. And yeah, so when I was in grad school, I've always been interested. Okay, so if you want to see how people are so smart, if you really want to understand how people can do all this thinking that seems so smart, you really have to start with children. So that's why I started looking at babies. And so I joined a developmental lab when I was in grad school. I proposed my dissertation when I was 6 months pregnant, and I dropped that project entirely and did something else, combining like neural networks and experiments with babies, and it was a lot of fun. So anyone who feels like, oh, I don't really know what I want to do, that's fine. Like if I hadn't taken this kind of circuitous road, then I wouldn't have gotten to where I am, because everything that seemed to be kind of out of the way ended up contributing, giving me a different perspective that was unique. And so don't worry about straight lines. Nah, just look for things that you find interesting and go after them.
Excellent. Thank you for that insight, Eliana. We'll come back to some of those points. We wanted to hear from Beata. Let me see if I can get your last name right. Mierzwa.
Perfect.
All right. I was practicing that one. And Quen is Emily. There you go. All right. Beata, would you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, the first thing I can say is that I don't think I ever lived in a country where people knew how to pronounce my name. So I think that's it's really great. So basically, I'm a postdoc in San Diego. I'm working on cell division, and I also create science, art, and fashion, like was mentioned before. But I was born in Europe, in Poland, and it was a really tiny village, so there were really no scientists around, and I did grow up with a little bit of both art and science. So my dad being an engineer and my mom an artist. So I had both a very analytical and also a very visual approach. But none of my family members went to study at university, so nobody was really familiar with how the academic world works. And overall, it was a very strict and traditional setting. But when I was a few years old, my parents moved with me to Austria. And I went to kindergarten and I didn't know a single word in German, which is the language there. And so that was, I have to say, quite an intense experience, especially at that age. But I was able to learn the language pretty quickly. And I really enjoyed living in a city where that has a different and more open culture as well. So I went to high school and then I wasn't sure what to do because, as I said before, I really liked science and I also really liked art. But somehow it never crossed my mind at that time that I could combine these in any way. I didn't really know about any role models, and it was just not something that was ever on my radar. And I decided to go for science because I was basically I didn't know much about it. I didn't know what a lab looked like. I didn't know how research works. But I was really fascinated by the concept of what we're made of and how our cells work and the DNA is our genetic material. So I was really curious about that, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to study science. So then I went to Switzerland for my master's thesis, and I started doing a lot of microscopy. So I was looking at all of these human cells dividing, and I really fell in love with cell division. I fell in love with how much we don't know about it still, and also how beautiful it is. Yeah, and then I went on to do my PhD, and for many years, I fully focused on the lab work. So basically every waking hour, I was in the lab, and I was really excited about my project, and I'm sure many of you know how this can happen very easily. So I never had the chance to really make time for creative projects. I always wanted to do something, but there was always deadlines and things like that. But then one day I had the opportunity to make a drawing about my research. So I was working on the final step of cell division, where the cells are already separated, but there's a bridge connecting them still. And I drew two cells literally holding a pair of scissors, and they are cutting each other apart using these scissors. So it was definitely not traditional, but I thought, I might as well start using it for my title slide and my presentations. And then I realized that people at my institute and at conferences, they could somehow remember my research even years after I presented it. And even people who never had anything to do with science, they kind of got curious and excited about what this could be and how this works. So I realized that this is a really great way how I could use art to communicate my research to all kinds of different audiences. And I've been basically doing this ever since. And I also always loved weird and colorful clothes and things like that. So I started making science fashion because I always loved doing microscopy. I love the beauty of what's inside of us and the cells. And I was always sad that basically nobody really shares them outside of the lab. We see them at conferences, we see them in our research, but it's never something that we share with the outside world very much. So I wanted to just find a way to share them with the outside world. Yeah, and now I'm here in San Diego. During the day, I work on my postdoc in the lab or at home now, I guess. And at night, I do all of the other things. So I work on these art projects and fashion projects. And I've also been trying out a lot of more different things that I've never thought that I would ever do. In particular, I really want to do as much as I can to get young women excited about science and really encourage them that science can be for everyone. So I'm working with the IFTEN Ambassador Program and the Young Women in Bio to organize events and workshops and give the people opportunities to connect with each other. And yeah, so all of this has been quite an adventure. I'm really grateful that I can be here, but of course, in retrospect, everything always sounds really straightforward. But in reality, there's quite a few things that I wish I would have known sooner. And it would have made things so much more easier. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, to connect. And I'm really excited to start this conversation. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Beata. And again, we see, it keeps coming back up that you don't have to, I think oftentimes we think that becoming a scientist or an engineer means that I have to compromise who I've known myself to be up to now, right? Where I grew up, how I grew up, the things I ate at home, in order to take on this new persona as a scientist and an engineer. So I'm really excited to hear, you know, a little bit about everybody's background and also dive into this next series of questions. Before Christina takes us to the next question, I did want to acknowledge a guest out in the audience there, Karen Harper. We see you from DoD STEM. Thank you for making the time to be with us. And Yolanda Tanner from NWIC also joining us out there. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. Christina, would you like to lead us to the next question?
Of course. I think some of the panelists have touched on this a little bit about, I just wanted, I think with the first question, I wanted to sort of get at you know, how your culture or your background and maybe gender shaped your interest in STEM. So I was hoping, you know, a lot of you touched on the fact that you wanted to pursue science, but how did you become interested in science? Like, where did that interest in science stem from? And were there expectations, whether they were family or cultural, that shaped your desire to pursue STEM? Anyone want to, I think Dequina, I think you had said that you had really always wanted to study STEM, but can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on where that desire came from?
I would actually say that my interest is from my family, but my push and drive is completely opposite. So for any of you who are first generation students, many immigrant parents will tell their kids they want them to be medical doctors. Like, that's like the thing. Like, go be medical doctors, prestigious, America, we made it. And I knew I didn't want to do that because I didn't like hospitals. And I love one-on-one interaction, but I don't like small talk. If I want to get to know you, I want to get to know you and see you all the time, not, you know, short periods of time. So we were actually forced to do book reports on different topics when we were in high school. And this is where I came across scientific process, because I had to pick a book like last minute, and it ended up being a book it was actually about forensic science. And some of it was about the scientific process and asking questions. And that's what really got me intrigued. And I was forced to basically write a paper on it. So that's where I got really interested in science. And on top of that, I was good at the sciences. When I say good, it came easier to me than to like history and literature and grammar. So it was one of my favorite subjects. But like when it goes into doing research or being a scientist, my background and my family, they have no idea what it is I do or how it's done. And if anything, that was a little bit of an obstacle or a hindrance. Because like I said, I went out looking for mentors or people who showed me that I could do what everyone else was doing. Because my perception of what a scientist was an old white man in a coat, like on TV shows, like a mad scientist. So that did make it hard until I found some mentors who showed me that you are capable, you can do it. And it doesn't matter what anyone else says.
That's great. I think your sort of first generation experience, I think, is one I think I can also relate to. I think, you know, I often wonder whether, you know, I pursued the sciences just because, you know, my parents were also immigrants. And so obviously they weren't going to be able to help me with reading homework and history so much as, you know, they could help me with math. They knew how math is the same no matter what language it's done in. So that was just where my skills lied, and that was what I pursued. And Beata, I guess, how you said your father was an engineer. Did he sort of instill that desire to pursue STEM, you think, or?
I think to some extent, for sure. I never thought about it at that time, but I think when I think about it, he always used to make toys for me. So he always, you know, was building these circuit boards and putting all the things on it. And I think because of that, I was really familiar with it. And I think he really wanted to try to make a point to show me that engineering is something that is fun and that I could do. And so I think my parents both were really supportive, and they said, oh, let's move to Austria. You can study whatever you want. But I have to say that my grandparents and other members of my family, for example, they didn't like it so much because it just didn't fit into the traditional system. And I think that's a thing that many of us probably face. So apparently I realized there's an unspoken rule. You have to get married at a certain age, and you have to build a house in the same village. And all of these things. So, of course, all of it was well intended, but I think can make it very hard, especially within family. So I think, you know, highlighting that this is a possibility and you know, for women, and that this is a normal thing can really make a difference.
I totally relate to that. I think my one cousin and I both got some inheritance from our grandmother because she thought she would never see us get married because we were just studying way too much. So would any of the other panelists want to comment on sort of where that STEM enthusiasm came from? Teresa?
Yes, I just want to say that growing up in an underserved community, either you would become a medical doctor, a nurse, a teacher, a lawyer, and because I was always trying to cure my family, like if my mom was feeling sick, I was like, oh, let me cure you. Like, let me give you this little medicine. And so I knew that I had that in me. And since I love children, I thought, well, how can I connect that, become a pediatrician, right? But one of the things that really motivated me to to think about that route was that I had family members who had passed away due to cancer, who have diabetes, high cholesterol. And I was like, well, how can I help my family? Oh, well, let me become a medical doctor. But then as I became involved in research, and my first like real hands-on basic science research was as an undergrad at California State University, Dominguez Hills, that's when I thought, wow, I could be a scientist, and I could be a different type of scientist because I love wearing jewelry. It's not the just white coat, goggles. No, I could do research. And so that was that push that I got from that experience, and also taking my culture wherever I go with my science.
Teresa, I did have a follow-up question with that. You know, the last thing I heard you say is taking your culture with you, and I'm interested to learn more about what that may look like. Is that, and this is not just a question for you, maybe Taneka or Eliana could chime in on this, but what does it look like to just show up as your authentic self, either culturally or subculturally, right? And I'm thinking about, Taneka, you mentioned earlier basketball, and I'm thinking, you know, the folks in basketball aren't as excited as, you know, your science counterparts and vice versa, right? And so can you all tell us a little bit more about that? How is it that you maneuver between those circles?
I'll explain a little what I mean about that. What I mean about my culture is many things. I'm proud of my language. I'm proud of the type of food I eat. People would sometimes make fun of me because when I was in grad school, I would have my avocado and a hot sauce that I would add to my lunch. Also, being proud of where you come from. Like, I'm very proud that I am from Compton, and Compton has a bad perception, but I know that sometimes when people look at you, they think like you should look a certain way, and I could be very professional, but also don't feel embarrassed of where I grew up, because hey, I grew up in the hood. Yes. I'm happy, I'm proud of my city of Compton. And when I go back home, my parents still live in Compton. That's home to me. And so being able to wear colorful clothing that I feel connected to, special jewelry that connects to my culture, the way I speak, the way that my parents have instilled in me the values of family, of true friendship, and also when you give back to the community, giving it with the heart, not just to put on paper, oh, I've done this. No, doing it with the heart y con ganas.
Thank you. Taneka or Eliana, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to kind of what a lot of the other panelists touched on too, to not let what you do define who you are. Like, one thing that you're doing doesn't have to define who you are. So yes, I play basketball, but I also like to read books about science. It's like I would go to practice and I would be, you know, middle of a timeout or middle of something. I was like, hey y'all, did y'all know? And I'll just be running off random facts or whatever I learned about in class. Like, listen, we a team, so we all gonna learn something about something today. So I think it's just finding a balance and being confident in knowing who you are versus what you do, and being able to balance and exercise both of those at the same time.
Thank you. And I can't help but to keep thinking of the physics involved in basketball, right? And how you could even teach physics with something like basketball, right? And
It's all one and the same. It's all one and the same.
that's what I'm talking about, that culturally relevant science, right? Eliana, would you like to tell us a little bit more about that, the cultural piece, maybe a family component? How is it that all those are interconnected?
Yeah, so I when I was doing computer science proper, I think it wasn't that much. Even when I got to the US, I think computer science geek culture, it seemed pretty universal. It was just like we watched the same show. It's like everything kind of connected. So like the same jokes and so on. But when I started working in psychology, I'm now in the psychology and neuroscience department, and that was the real culture shock. And everybody's like, why are you wearing a shirt with a funny character on it? That's not professional, and that kind of thing. So so yeah, it can be tricky to navigate, I think, sometimes. But I think it is important, like everyone was saying, to just show that there is not a single way to be, especially when it comes to things like the shirt you wear. Come on now. We can be tolerant of different shirts, right? So I think that that is really important. And I've been working more and more in outreach programs, because of my experience having learned how to program being such a huge advantage when I went to college. In part because of that, I'm now thinking that's probably why I started doing outreach projects with kids, teaching kids how to code, and mostly kids from immigrant communities, underrepresented minorities, and so on. So working with kids at school and so on. And so a lot of the stuff that we do, one thing that was really critical, I think, for me to get really into computer science was when I started designing and writing my own programs. So it was like something that I could imagine and I could just make it happen, make it work. And like, you don't need like equipment, it's right there. I mean, you need a computer, but relatively speaking, you don't need like a huge investment because you can just make it happen in your computer. And so I try to do that with my kids. And so we do a lot of for example, I did a project through like several months on putting together Dia de los Muertos altar, and so this was all elementary school girls, and so they went around their community and collected photographs and stories, and then made this like interactive display and so on. And it's always like trying to connect it so that there's not this huge gap between like, this is what you do at school and this is what you do in real life, right? Like it's there's technology is everywhere in your life, and so is science and learning and so on. So there's no reason to keep them apart.
Thank you, Elena. And part of the outreach work that you're involved with is also with Tecnolochicas, is that correct?
Yes.
I was wondering if you would just take a moment just to kind of tell folks what that is before we go into the next question, because we have a few questions coming up in the chat that we want to make sure we get to, but I think it's very important that folks know what Tecnolochicas is and how they can support students.
Right. So it's a support network for I think Hispanic. I work with much younger kids, to be honest. I work with like kindergartners, fifth graders is already pushing it for me. I will, you know, sometimes they age into fifth grade and I can't let them go, so I still work with them. But yes, I know that technology gets mostly focuses on like high school and undergraduates, and have this mentorship program where they want like near mentors. So I'm not very near age to my kindergartners that I work with, but
that's all right. I would say that you're priming them to receive those later services, right?
they are fearless. They're fearless. Like in high school, I mean, I'm talking even with my kids, right? Like there's a point in high school where girls may get like a little reluctant And but 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds, they're just like, of course I can do this. What do you mean? I work with a group of kindergartners. They had been in school. They were all English language learners, and so they were still navigating, like, these are the rules of the school and so on. And we were doing coding and robotics, and they can do it. Of course they can. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I want to take a moment. Christina, if you could maybe go through the chat and pick out one question that you can ask next. I'm going to go ahead and man, the time just flies by, right? It almost seems like we should have like a whole 3-hour session and I deliver you lunch somehow. But here we are, right? We're like 10 minutes away from the closing, and I just want to make sure I'm mindful of everybody's time. I did want to honor one of the questions here that I see from Carmen Castillo, and she wants to know, what's the best way to make time for yourself and graduate studies? She's scared that she's going to miss out on family and friends while in grad school. Yes, you will. And she's really far away from family, and every time she goes home, she sees her brother taller, and it makes her think how much she's missing out. Any commentary on that from any of the panelists?
I can kind of speak to that. Like I said, I'm from Akron, Ohio, but I currently live in San Diego. So I think my mom is in the room, so from Ohio. But I have a younger sister who basically we're like 11 years apart. So I've been kind of gone and in college since she kind of ever knew. So every time I go home, like, she literally grows taller and taller. I think she's a lot taller than me now. But I think the best way to kind of stay connected is, thank God for technology now, but just always check in, but still present your authentic self to them, and keep those relationships open. So anytime, like, try to just make time and you set boundaries for yourself. So if we're only studying for 3 hours, we're only studying for 3 hours, and allocate that 1 hour of time to talking to your family, whether that's watching her paint her nails on FaceTime or coloring or reading a book with them, doing whatever. Like, make sure you make time for the things that are important to you. And exercise your values, because once you're done with school, school's over. Like, that institution's always going to be there, but your time there won't last forever, and then you're going to miss out on the memories that you wish you did have. So just try to do whatever you can within your power to create memories, no matter if it's via FaceTime, internet, or you have to fly back or do whatever. So I think just being conscious of setting the boundaries for yourself to excel in multiple avenues.
Amazing feedback, and I'm watching your mom as you're answering the questions to see if she's gonna call you out on any of that. But it looks like
I hope not.
It looks like it's official.
Stay on mute, Mom. Stay on mute.
That's some legit information right there. So thank you very much for confirming that. Is there anybody else that wants to address that before we move on to the next
I'll go,
question?
Beto.
Teresa, yes, please.
Yeah. So being from California to the East Coast, that's a long ways. It's not like I could drive up and be like, oh, let me go visit mom and dad, especially during this pandemic. But one of the things that always has kept us close is that I always talk to them every day. I find the time to speak to my parents, to make sure they're fine, to let them know how I'm doing. And whenever there's conferences that I get to travel and they're in California, we'll figure out always a time to meet up, or I stay there extra days to spend with my family. Or even if there's a 3-day long weekend, I go to California. Even if it's 3 days, I go, I see them, I see my parents, I see my family, and then I come back. Sometimes it's tough because of the jet lag, but staying connected through phone. They're not really tech savvy, so we just speak on the phone. Otherwise, we could just do FaceTime, right? But finding any moment to visit them is important. Stay connected to your family, regardless if you're miles apart, staying that close with them.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I was taking a moment to read through the chat, and I want to make sure the next questions. I know Christina's queuing up the next question, but folks are asking about imposter syndrome. They're asking about my ability to be fluid and change, what thing I want to study for the rest of my life. Those are a lot of your choices, right? You get to decide where you're going to be at ultimately. So you have power in doing so. But imposter syndrome is always going to be there. And definitely we should probably think about having a forum to host some of these great questions afterwards. So Dequina, thank you for making that a point. I do want to encourage all the panelists to drop their emails if they're willing to in the chat, so that some of the audience members can reach out to you and follow up. Christina, did you have one question that you want to queue up for our panelists?
Oh,
Zoom got you again. You're muted.
sorry. I thought I had unmuted myself a while ago. Okay, so I wanted to queue up the question on imposter syndrome, I guess, and find out if any of you guys have any advice on how to deal with that. Do you have any sorts of support systems that help you get through that? Anyone interested in taking on that question? Beata, do you ever deal with that?
Oh, yes. I think that's a great thing to discuss. I think maybe we should have a separate panel for that too. But I think there's a lot of advice that I would have loved to give myself before, because I feel like we always think that everybody else has everything under control and we are the only ones who don't know what we're doing. And I think what I've learned over time is that it's okay to not always feel 100% prepared. It's okay to, if something doesn't work, especially when you do experiments, right? Experiments are basically, by definition, it means that it can fail quite a lot because you're trying something that nobody has ever tried before. So I really struggled with taking this personally at the beginning a little bit. So maybe I'm not meant for science and things like that. But if you think about it, it's part of it. It's part of the way science works. And if something doesn't go the way you want it, it's also not the end of the world. I feel like as long as you keep that in mind and remind yourself, I think that is already very helpful to be conscious of it. And definitely connect with people. I always thought that I'm the only one. This is just what's happening to people. But as soon as I realized that that there's other people as well, that was a big help as well.
My 16-year-old just gave me some advice on this last week. She said, if you feel like you're an imposter, don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. Just feel like, oh my gosh, I'm fooling them all. I'm getting away with something. So I'm gonna try that. But yeah, definitely, yeah, it doesn't quite go away. And just as I think like, oh, I've got this, just something happens. I was like, oh, wait, no. So yeah, work in progress.
I can kind of add to both of those. I think for every doubt or negative comment that we have for ourselves, we should supply it with a positive one. So, oh my God, I don't feel like I'm good enough. Yo, I deserve to be here because someone else believed in me. So I think a lot of times we need to realize that we are in these positions, rooms, or spaces because someone seen value in us. And then it should be our responsibility to add that value with our voice or however we see fit to add value or worth to those spaces.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Taneka. I'm sorry, folks. I have to be the bearer of bad news, but it's 4 o'clock. I'm willing to stay on a few more minutes if you all are. I just, I wanted to recap some of the great things that we heard. We heard how valuable research opportunities are. So get out there and hustle. Find out what's available near you. Find out what's available for you. Some of it might be close. Some of it might be far, but there's programs that will pay for you to go get some research as an undergraduate, as a graduate student. We heard about the value and the place of identity, right? That you don't have to compromise who you are, who you've been, for who you're going to become. The value of mentors, right? And being connected, having somebody on your team that's going to support you, that's going to push you. The importance of family and balance in relationships, right? Not only with others, but even with yourself, and setting boundaries. And also the invaluable gift of being able to give back. I think oftentimes we feel that oh, well, I'm just a community college, I'm just this, and we really take away the power from who we are, because to the person who's not in your seat, you are somebody to look up to. So don't ever forget the value that you bring to a table and what you have to offer to somebody. I did have a very selfish last question that I wanted to ask, and I wanted to know, as a male, as a man, I wanted to know, how can I best do my job to support women, to support, whether it's a coworker, my wife, my daughter. What advice do you have for a male that does not want to not be supportive?
One of the things that you could tell a young girl is, as a male, is that you're strong, you're capable, and you can do it. You have what it needs. You have the skills that are needed to be where you are and where you need to get. Being supportive and not discouraging, because I faced a lot of discouragement throughout my career as a Latina person, and growing up in Compton, that I was not smart, that I didn't know how to write, that I was incapable. And just having those positive words that can encourage that person, those girls, is important, coming from a male or from anybody. That's my advice.
Anybody else? This is where you groom us, right? You're educating us so that we can be supportive. Anything else that you want to share?
I would just say, listen, like, and this goes for any kid, but just for girls, women, just listen, like, really listen. They have a point. Even if you disagree, there's a point there. So listen. I think, yeah.
I think another thing I've noticed is that, men should realize that if a woman says, I think, she probably knows it. And you should probably listen, right? Like, if a guy says something, it's not always clear that he's right. Like, you might have to push on it a bit. But if a woman says, I think we should really consider doing it this way, she probably has some really strong reasoning behind it. And you might want to take a listen to it. And I also think with COVID-19 now, I think at least, most of the articles I'm reading now sort of say that, women are sort of bearing the burden of this situation now, being at home and having to do so much of the work in the home and then still maintain their jobs. So I think, to support your wife with all of the things that are going on in the house, keeping the calendar, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but that's a lot of brain power that goes into like keeping everyone's schedules together. So I think, whatever you can do to help, the young ones and the older ones is terrific.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any of our other panelists want to say any last words?
I guess just one last word to that question that you had. I guess just doing some self-reflection and how you treat your mentees, whether that be especially between men and women. A lot of times it's subconscious and you don't recognize it. So say you're in a laboratory and then women are expected to maybe wash the dishes or to clean up or to organize databases in addition to the research work, and then the males aren't. Or the compliments you give to your female researchers, like, oh, you're so great at making a cordial work environment, instead of telling that they're great at science, that they're great scientists. Like those small things that you don't realize you're doing that can actually have an impact on a woman's self-esteem and her self-worth as she navigates the scientific career.
Thank you. Very great point. Any last things?
One last thing, sorry.
Yes, Teresa. I'm expecting to hear from Teresa and Taneka next.
Yes, for instance, if a woman gets stressed up and goes to lab, don't question her, where are you going? Or why are you so dressed up? Let her be, because a scientist can look different. Not necessarily, like I mentioned before, with a lab coat and goggles and looking all like, okay, whatever. No, if I want to dress up, and I used to, I would hate when people would ask me, where are you going? Well, I'm going to the lab. Why? Why are you so dressed up? Because I felt like it. It makes me feel good, and this is who I am. So never question that.
That's right. I will make sure that I don't do that. All right, Taneka, last remarks. This is our send-off message here. What do you got for us?
Oh man, the pressure is on now. I guess never doubt yourself. Know why you're here. You have value because you are valuable, and be you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I can't tell you enough what a great time that I've had. Yes, I was the most nervous with this panel, but you know what? I think I have the biggest smile that I've had on any of the other panels. Not that they weren't great, but I really enjoyed the conversation with you all. Thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of your day, for sacrificing a part of your day to be with us, and for investing in the next generation. We look forward to staying in touch with you. I believe for all you out there in the audience, the emails have been put into the chat, so feel free to reach out and stay connected with folks, and definitely feel free to follow us on the next session that we're going to be hosting, or check out some of the older ones. Was there a last comment that I heard somebody was going to chime in? All right. Well, with that being said, thank you all so much. Thank you all in the audience for participating and for joining us. And we look forward to seeing greater things that you're going to step into. Thank you.